Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Master Crafted. This week, we're going to talk about all things 40K in Colorado, especially the Garage Hammer tournament we went to down in Colorado Springs. We had a great time. We had some good barbecue, and we got to play an RTT in the purest form, as Phil likes to say. It is the way to play Warhammer. Phil, let's swing it over to you and tell us more about this, what we did this weekend.
Yeah, so while some of you maybe played your 40K inside with the heat on or your air conditioning, Lane, Beau, and I, we played it in the best way possible out in the garage, Colorado Springs. It was a little cold. I wouldn't have been surprised if I saw some snow on the ground, but we were all in there having a great time in a garage, 26 players, an RTT to be incredibly proud of, and the individual running the organization, one of the two we have brought on here today. Not only did he run the organization, not only did he open up his house, not only did he get food for everyone and set up a space and tables and terrain, like the list goes on and on of all the great things that he's done. Beau has decided now to sacrifice his free time to come on and have a chat with us about an incredible tournament weekend. Beau, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, so to get started, we just always like to go over with our guests kind of how they got into 40K, how long they've been playing, what they have been enjoying, things they enjoy about the community, and you have all of the things under the umbrella, not only as a player, as a community organizer, so you have a ton that we want to know about.
Yeah, so I mean, my journey into 40K is probably more conventional than maybe a lot of people are willing to admit. Like a big thing in my adventure into this was brought out because of some different mental health issues that I had. So I actually have complex PTSD from some different things that have happened with my son. And so part of me coming to terms with that and getting out of my shell and kind of getting into a community that I can be a part of was 40K. So it's one of those things where it's probably not something that a lot of people are willing to admit, but for me, mental health is kind of like a little bit of a center point here. So you'll notice it in the club. We always say things like play by intent, but what we're really saying is, you don't know what the other person's going through. Don't be a dick. Don't come in here and try to be that guy just so that you can win. You're coming in here to play with dolls, and you need to act that way. And so that's kind of like how I got into it. Was I was trying to find some sort of a hobby where I could get out of my house. I would go and talk to people and see them face to face. And I wanted to have some sort of an aspect that also would tap into sort of the creativity that I like as well. And so Warhammer was an awesome fit for me. I kind of started out with Necrons, which was hilarious because I don't like Necrons anymore at all. They are all out of my house, and I hope to never see them again. They weren't fun to paint, which is a big thing for me. But then, as we'll probably talk about eventually, for me, a big thing is melee armies. I love getting in your face, and I love hitting you. So yeah, nowadays I play a lot of Chaos. I play Tyranids as well, just because I like the aesthetic, and I think that they're kind of an interesting dynamic way to play. I love the Monster Mash. And if we get the opportunity to talk about some of my 3D prints, just the idea of making these big, massive monsters that are my own, as opposed to whatever a GW is willing to shill out to you, I think that that's a lot of fun. So Tyranids leave a lot of creativity open for that, as well as the different Chaos factions. There's not supposed to be something it has to be this way, it has to look this way, and so that's why I really appreciate those two armies.
Yeah, that is awesome. Being able to really do what you want with your own creativity and the 3D prints. I mean, looking at some of your demons, we were talking about it yesterday when we got to play. Your great Unclean Ones are like 4 times as big as a normal one, but they're so awesome. And just getting to really have that extra expression, I think, and really get to have that creativity is such a cool thing.
Yeah. No, and if you ever get the chance to see him, I love Kugoth. He's on his throne being carried by Nurglings. He's twice the size of any other great Unclean One that you'll see, but it kind of taps into the whole idea of what we base our club around, which is just like, it's not that serious. Like if somebody wants to be like, oh, I can see the tip of his throne that's not supposed to be there. I'm like, I don't care, shoot it. Go for it. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here for pretty tables and making friends. That's it.
Now, Beau, you do say that, and you are a huge proponent of having a good time and doing all those things, but I think you can say that you do enjoy playing great games of 40K, and that comes with playing good armies and doing all those things. So we had a tournament this weekend, a 26-man RTT. Why don't you just talk to us about kind of what went into putting that together and, why you wanted to even do that, to let 26 crazy dudes hang around in your house all day, and then kind of what you ran? because I think people would be really interested in that list, especially right now where demons are in a very unique place in terms of competitiveness. I don't know if they haven't necessarily been figured out yet, but they do have a lot of tools.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're just so much fun to play. It's one of the most dynamic armies that I've ever seen. But yeah, to kind of touch on what it was that we did this weekend. So this was the third time that we've held what we call Uncle Bobo's Garage Bonanza. So what we do is we originally all that this was we had 8 tables that we didn't even own the tables. We had people bring tables from their home and let us borrow them so that we could prop them up in my garage. We had 16 people at that first tournament. Pretty much everything was borrowed. I don't think we even did lunch. If we did, it was like something easy. Oh, it was pizza. Yeah. So, it was super basic and it was kind of just this opportunity that myself and Matt saw. Colorado Springs doesn't really have a huge competitive, place out here. And then the only other club that was out here had a kind of a poor reputation. And so they kind of gave Colorado Springs a poor reputation and it kind of turned people off from wanting to be part of that. And so what ended up happening was myself and Matt, we went up to a tournament in Denver in October of not last year, but 2023. And it was just me and him. Me and him were playing in his basement, every week just to try and prepare for our first ever competitive tournament. We didn't know anybody else was playing competitively in the spring, so we were like, I guess it's just us. We show up, we meet these 3 wild guys from Wyoming in the line to get in, and it kind of just kicked off from there. We immediately started having a good time. We immediately started talking to people and making friends. That's one of my mottos is even if you go to a tournament, you just want to go 6-0 on friends every time. So I kind of try to, take that into every tournament. You can win every game, but if you make 6 friends, perfect. So a lot of that kind of played into how it was we were finding people who were in Colorado Springs who didn't have a community to play with, or they were kind of turned off by the community in some ways as well. So Matt and I decided, you know what, we're just going to build our own. So by the time that we had gone to RMO about 6 months later, we had a community of about 30 people. A lot of them were not competitive players. They were just casual players who wanted to see what it was about. And up until now, that's kind of how it was, is we've been kind of roping in people and just saying like, hey, do you like 40K? Do you want to learn how to play it a little bit better? And the emphasis there is more on not walking away from a game feeling like you did something wrong. A lot of people come into Warhammer, they lose a bunch of games, and they think, "Man, I suck at this. My opponent's having a bad time. They're not getting to play a full game, so I don't want to play anymore." And so for us, it's like a big part of that is like, "Hey, if you're struggling with the game, you should learn how to play it competitively first." Narrative stuff is great, but if you're going into every narrative game with the most crazy list that you've ever had, then you're not going to have a lot of fun all the time. So you learn how to play competitively first, nail down those rules, nail down how to do things like list building, and kind of carry that into your competitive experience. So once we started kind of like building upon those different practices and kind of bringing people into the fold, our community just got huge. I mean, it blew up after RMO. I think we probably went from 20 or 30 people, and now we're all the way up to like 60 as of the end of last year. And so one thing that we wanted to do was we were just like, well, let's put some feelers out there. Like, let's just see what resources do we have available to us where we can maybe just like try to throw our own event, see what happens, see who shows up. So we held a 16-person event, and we ended up with something like a 12-person wait list. It was pretty crazy. We filled up almost immediately. We had a fantastic group of guys that showed up, and we had a bunch of really great games, and we had the opportunity to kind of make it a little bit more professional and personal because we had access to my 3D printing abilities and stuff like that. So the prizes weren't just like, hey, here's a laminated sheet of paper that says that you won first place. Like it was an actual trophy that we had available for people, and it was really cool, and everybody really loved it. And we were just like, well, we could fit 8 tables up here, we could fit 4 more in the basement. And so this last time around, we went from 24 in our last one. This most recent one was 26. And so what kind of goes into that is the big lead up to it is making sure that we have everything that we need to set up our own tables. So we made sure that we had all the tables that we needed. We had all the plywood that we needed and cloths and mats. Something that we're getting really close to is having enough terrain for all of our tables. So we're pretty close there. I've managed to print out 9 of them at this point. But then as well, some of the people in the community have bought some of my terrain, and then the stipulation is if you buy my terrain, I'm going to ask you to bring it to my tournaments. So so we do still technically borrow a little bit, and we're still doing it the exact same way. We're getting guys to just sign up on their own. We don't release things publicly yet, and we don't have to. We end up with large wait lists. Our slots fill up immediately. And then, like this last time around, it had to be an invitational. We didn't have the ability to host all the people that wanted to be there. So we were like, this might be the last one we do in the garage. But we had a great send off. We had an awesome group of guys. Everybody had a great time. It was awesome to have some of the different clubs show up from Wyoming. We had guy from New Mexico show up. We had Castle Rock and Denver, and we had all these different clubs that were coming out and seeing what it was that the Thunder Cluckers were doing down here, and we're having a clucking good time. I don't know what to say. So it was funny to see like people were walking out and they were saying like this was the best RTT I've ever been to. One of the guys who's part of our club smoked a bunch of great meat for us, and he's just a total legend for that. And so we did it the exact same way. We invited people, they showed up, they played in the garage. We're a little bit more professional. We have 2 heaters in there, 2 whole heaters. It's crazy. A bunch of lights, so it's not as if you're gonna go into our tournaments in the garage and feel like you're out of place. Like you're not gonna walk in there and be like, oh my God, it's a garage the entire time and just have that in your head the entire time. You're gonna go in there and you're gonna play a game, and it's gonna be in an environment that you can enjoy the game in. So that's kind of where we kind of try to plant that in. We try to get to the point where people can have the same tournament experience that you would inside of that conference room up in Denver as you do in my garage and my basement.
Yeah, and you're not only doing this on a couple weekends throughout the year. You guys are having weekly for your local members meetups to get those practice games in. Weekly, just come on in, play in the garage, in the basement, and get good competitive 40K games in. And that's amazing. Opening your house not only for a weekend but weekly. Whew, man, that's a legend. Yeah. You're right up there with Tim for that smoked meat. I mean, that is awesome.
No, and I mean it's one of the it's a labor of love, It's so much fun to have people come out and just play some Warhammer, and I don't have to leave my house. Everybody else has to. So yeah, we have a ton of fun on Tuesdays, and it's crazy the competitiveness that we have while we all have just a fantastic time. I mean, we've got guys who regularly podium at the places that they go to, or go 4-2 or 5-1. High ELO ratings, and then we've also got guys who are like, I still haven't won a game yet, and it's like, well, that doesn't matter. We're all having a good time, no matter who it is that we're playing. The different skill levels, we're all equals in the I won't say it, but the chicken coop.
That is some great information. That's some great perspective, and hopefully our listeners, wherever they're at in the world, in terms of if they wanted to start their own community or do something like that, all it takes is asking that first question. Ask that first person if they want to get together, and if they love VK, they will come. If you give them the space, they will come. We are incredibly proud. I feel incredibly thankful to have a great organizer like yourself and a community that both Lane, myself, and you really love. So it's great to see. Now, let's get to the meat and potatoes, or the boil and pus, that is Nurgle Demons. Okay,
Yeah.
like an absolute madman, brought Plague Legion this weekend because you were like, combat, overrated. Shooting, don't want to do it. Battle Shocks, I'm going to make you take so many, you will have to fail them. So tell us about the list that you brought this weekend for Nurgle Demons.
Yeah, so even prior to playing Plague Legion, before it was even a thing, I brought 3 great Unclean Ones to a teams tournament because I just love my fat boys. So yeah, over this weekend I got to finally play, the kind of detachment that I want to play, which has my 3 fat boys, and they're doing whatever they need to do. There isn't any guns at all in the list. The only thing that you would call a gun is the flamers that are attached to the great Unclean Ones. The Daemon Prince had a little pea shooter. Maybe that counts for something. I don't know. There's some melee. The melee is not very good. Even the best strength melee that I had in my list was strength 8. So it's not a killy list. I'm not out there to charge you. I'm not out there to shoot you. I'm just there to slowly but surely get in your face. Once I'm in your face, you're going to start taking battle shocks immediately, like Phil said, and I'll kill you with mortal wounds, and I'll win the game by just not letting you score. So the list was essentially, it was 2 great Unclean Ones. One of the great Unclean Ones is running a lone op bubble, so he gives out a 6-inch aura that lets everything within 6 inches not be able to get shot within 18, which is pretty vital in a list like this because we are slow. We don't get across the board very fast. So the idea is kind of, if you want to get into me and you want to start trying to plink some wounds off of these big fat tough guys, you got to get closer. So once you're closer, now I'm closer. Now we can have a game. The other great Unclean One that I had runs a a different enhancement that removes a model whenever somebody fails a battle shock test. It doesn't come up terribly often, but there are some matchups where if you have models that are more than 2 wounds that you can pull them off the board like that, then it's very useful. We also pulled in the man himself, Rodigus. Halves your OC, halves your movement, add some extra damage. Always throw that guy in deep strike. I want him on the board where I want him, rapid ingressing, throwing him through walls whenever I can. He's still probably the heaviest hitter in the entire list, even though he's only strength 8. So other than that, we've got a couple of different key characters that are in there. So one of them is a Demon Prince who passes out a similar aura, which gives out stealth. So once you get within that 18-inch bubble, now you've got to deal with stealth. So you're -1 to hit on anything that I've got around me. There's also 2 Poxbringers, which they allow the unit that they're attached to, so Plague Bears, to crit on 5s instead of just 6s. As well, the added benefit there, though, is that they pass out a 6-inch aura of -1 to your leadership, which is pretty important in a detachment like this. The other ones that you'll see I have our Sloppity Bilepiper. Got 2 of those guys. They're fantastic. They come in, they start doing battle shocks in the fight phase, dishing out mortal wounds. I run 1 with a set of Plague Bears, and then I also run 1 optionally on his own. When he's on his own, he kind of can be forgotten about. So a lot of my opponents will just be like, I didn't see him there, and now I'm in your face, and oh shoot, I have to take a battle shock. Alternatively, like I had a matchup this weekend against Imperial Knights where I kept him in Deep Strike because he doesn't battle shock vehicles. So I just kept him in Deep Strike, and I dropped him in when I needed to. Other than that, we've got a block of 6 Nurglings, just because they're hard to kill. Plague Bears to attach to the characters. It's pretty much all that they're good for. I had a lot of Beasts of Nurgle. I had 5 total. So I had 2 sets of 2 and 1 set of 1. The 2 sets of 2 would start in Deep Strike. I drop them down somewhere where they can be annoying, maybe dish out a couple of devastating wounds. But the big thing there is that if you don't kill them all the way, they come back. So they're incredibly hard to deal with. And then with this detachment, there is a stratagem where if you kill one of those Beasts of Nurgle, I can spend 2 CP and I can bring 1 back. So you just spent 2 or 3 turns trying to kill it. Hey, here it is. It's coming back right in your face. The other things that were in my list were some Plague Drones. They kind of help with the lethality of the detachment itself. So we have all of these lethal hits, which are great. But when those don't wound, now I'm probably wounding you on 5s and 6s. So the Plague Drones pass out full wound rerolls against whatever it is that they shoot. So that kind of was a great added benefit in that regard. Another thing that you'll use often here is just to kind of get every opportunity to battle shock people. So the one stratagem that we have that works really well is the +1 to hit. After I hit you, take a battle shock. It's fantastic to use on the Plague Bears, especially when I'm critting on 5s and hitting on 2s, and then I've got Plague Drones giving me full wound rerolls. I can actually deal out some pretty good damage that way. Rodigus can give them +1 damage. I wish that there was a way to do some better AP on there, but that's kind of what we ended up with. Yeah, and so the way that it kind of plays is it kind of works like a waterfall. So you start up in one corner of the board. You stack up the buffs for the lone op and the stealth. You've got a couple of things down, ready to move on to your opponent's natural, and then you're basically just taking your main force and falling onto the board. The kind of general way that I run it is the guys that start down here is usually going to be a Bilepiper. I will take him and send him across with the strat to give him 5 extra movement. He gives out 1 inch extra on the movement for his squad, so he ends up going 11. And then, that pretty much puts me in my opponent's natural. And if I get within 6 inches of something, I can start trying to do battle shocks, or I could even just try and charge him right then and there. Get onto their objective with 21 OC, a battle shock, whatever gets near, dish out some mortal wounds, and kind of play it like that. Typically, they die by turn 2 or turn 3, but it's enough to make my opponent pull resources down over there and deal with it, as opposed to, letting me run the board up top, which is the next part of it, which is just pushing that primary force all the way onto my natural. Once they're there, I'm not giving it up. I'm leaving a fat boy there. You're not going to touch him. If you want to come up and touch him, fine. You're not going to kill him. And then I have the option by turn 3 to say, where have they given me an empty spot? So usually by now I've got Rodigus somewhere in the air ready to come down. So I decide, am I pushing their home objective or am I pushing the middle? I'm usually not going to try and spread myself thin and go down to the opponent's natural. Just because I do have limited mobility. If I send something down there and they have no backup, then I'm kind of out of luck. So typically it's going down to the middle or over to the opponent's deployment zone, depending on the mission and depending on what it is that they're doing on the board. And then at that point, it's just battle shock, deny points, and be tough and hard to kill, and that's it. Lane and I had a fantastic game over the weekend. We were round 3, and it was kind of hilarious because I think it was turn 3 or turn 4. I looked and I was like, I'm going to lose this game. Like, but then I looked at Lane and I said to him, I'm going to make you work for it. I think I was down like 25 or 30 points. And so I just went full battle shock mode. I battle shocked whatever I could. I just kind of nibbled away at the little scoring units, and it ended up being a 1-point game just because I was able to say, like, you're not going to score, I'm going to score, and we'll just close this gap as much as we can. And that's kind of like the nice little thing about Nurgle, is if I can position myself well enough, turn 4 and 5 can actually be huge turns for me to swing. And I think a lot of people recognize that in the current meta, like going second is very important. And for me, it's the opposite, because if I go first and I get the opportunity to battle shock you, or if I get myself in a position where the bottom of round 5, I can battle shock you and take away those primary points, it does make a big difference in their game plan, and kind of like, oh, I was expecting to get 15 points this turn and I only got, 5 or 10. So there's a lot of great opportunities like that for Plague Legion. I know it's not very popular. I think that last I checked, there's like 12 people in the whole country playing it right now. But I'm one of the lovers. I love it. I think it's fantastic to throw big bodies across the board. Even in the index, my favorite thing was deep striking a great unclean one within 3 inches, and then deep striking another great unclean one within 6 inches, and then just being in your back line and being like, haha, I'm here now. So I don't get to do that anymore, but it's still pretty fun.
I mean, now you can just, as long as you have the shadow, deep strike within 6 and just charge now, because there's no stopping you on
No,
that.
no, they took that away from me.
Yeah, well,
That's
it's
index.
back. Yeah.
Oh, you mean in the index?
In the
Yeah.
index.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so, but, I feel like I already know the answer, but I'm still going to ask it. As a Nurgle enthusiast, do you think that the Nurgle specific detachment is better for Nurgle than the index?
There's some very glaring differences, and the one that you're going to see more often than not is the mobility and the defensiveness. In the index, you're much more mobile. I can pick up my fat boys and I can put them back down. I can put them back down within 6 inches of you, which is a big deal when you're dealing with a 5-inch base. So those kinds of things are fantastic. But then, of course, the one thing that I think everybody who plays this is going to miss is that 4-up Feel No Pain on the Great Unclean One. I mean, that thing just becomes a powerhouse. And it's honestly something that I had to try and come up with ways to make up for, which is why you see that lone up and that stealth bubble, because it does make the army resilient enough to make up for the 4-up Feel No Pain. Doing it math-wise, that 4-up Feel No Pain is, I think in general, it ends up saving you like anywhere from 10 to 15 wounds per game, which is a big deal on a T12 body. The idea kind of came to me of like, well, if I can avoid taking 10 to 15 wounds in some other way, like if you miss a shot on your repulsor executioner, or you couldn't get into range with one of your guns, like your eradicators or whatever, then at that point I kind of feel like I've mitigated some wounds in some way, which is partially why I think that Daemon Prince and that aura is extremely important. And essentially that's all that to say, yes, the index is very good for those kinds of things, but it doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to be mobile and be defensive inside of the Plague Legion detachment. You still can throw guys through walls. You can add that 5 inches onto your infantry, which is a huge thing because it's not an advance. You can still do some actions and you can still charge. So yeah, I think that there's still great tools to be had inside of Plague Legion. There's some things you're going to miss, but if you kind of treat it as its own army, then you're not going to miss it as much.
Yeah, I will say, having gotten to play, we haven't ever got to play your index demons against my guard, but having played into the lone up and stealth, I felt like personally as a shooting army was almost more problematic than the 4-up Feel No Pain, because it made a lot of your army hard to deal with, right? In general, when you just have the one dude with a 4-up Feel No Pain, I'm like, well, I'll just keep throwing trash at you because he's not actually that good at getting out of situations. So I'll just hold him down and never try to kill him unless I can just be like, well, I'll put 3 tanks into him and maybe I'll kill him,
Yeah.
But just in general, having to play the ranged game, have to deal with the stealth, it really did, I felt like, make the Nurgle demons a lot more as a whole to deal with.
Yeah, that's been my experience. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's like I said, it's something that you miss, but it's definitely not something that you can't make up.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've gone over what you have brought, or you did bring to this. Let's go ahead and, if you want to give us just a brief overview of kind of how your games went, any things you kind of like picked up from them, learned from them, if you take back and do differently maybe into those armies. And yeah, let's just hear about how much fun you had in your own garage.
Absolutely. I had the most fun out of everybody. I mean, it's so cool to have everybody just come to my house and play like that. I mean, it's amazing. So, like, one thing. So, I'll kind of go through game by game and kind of sum up what my experience was. So, first up, I went up against Orcs, which in my head was going to be a great game. I was going to have plenty of options to like stop him from doing things. I've got all my flamers to take out his little Gretchen. I think he had like 120 Gretchen or something like that. So in my head, it was like, well, I'll survive his Wog. He'll crash against me. Maybe he takes a couple units, and then we'll be fine. What I didn't anticipate was the Stompa being as good as it is. That thing walked up in the Wog, shot one gun, and it killed a Great Unclean One and did plus 20, I think, wounds on it. So it was wild. And I'm sitting there turn one with one less Great Unclean One, just thinking to myself, like, this is not the kind of game that I anticipated. And luckily for me, that was when he had called his Wog, and so I had to I was like, okay, well, now I can bounce back. It's my turn. I can push forward a little bit. I broke out of my deployment zone after all of his screens pretty easily. And then turn two, another Great Unclean One goes down to the Stompa. I'm like, okay, this is starting to get a little bit painful. At that point, I couldn't get things out on the board. His shooting was picking off whatever it was that I could put onto objectives. His Stompas were taking out a Great Unclean One each turn. So it did not end up being a very close game at all. So I moved on from that one right into Knights, which in going into that, I was expecting Imperial Knights to be one of the worst matchups for me. I don't have anything above Strength 8. Your leadership on your big guys is still leadership 6, and he had 3 of his big ones. And then on top of that, he had a Lancer, and I was like, I don't know if I can get past that. Invuln with such low volume, which is the other problem that Nurgle demons have, is just not very many attacks. But it actually went very well for me. I was able to kind of stack the board exactly how I wanted, so I had my main force up here. He didn't have enough board presence to keep me out of the middle, so Rodigus just dropped right down in the middle. And in my own fear and anticipation of not being able to kill it, I charged his Great Unclean One with both or not Great Unclean One, his Lancer with both Great Unclean Ones and Rodigus. And I think I overkilled it by like 15 wounds. So I was like, okay, I can kill knights. Good to know. Turns out that lethals actually do quite a bit of work. So that was a great experience. Me and him had a great game. I think I came away from it a little bit more confident in my ability to take out big stuff, which was something that I was like going into that whole tournament. I was like, I'm going to go up against knights and I'm going to lose immediately. So that felt pretty good. After that, we went up against each other lane.
Yeah.
Play them whenever you can. And it was only I think my second or third ever game against Guard in this entire edition. So I did not have much experience, and they're one of those armies that I tend to underestimate. So I think it was turn 2, Lane said to me, he was like, I'm going to kill 30 Plague Bearers this turn, and I was like, I don't think you are, dude, but go for it. And what do you know? I think he killed like 25 or something like that. I was like, dude. So yeah, I gotta learn to stop underestimating you guys. But it was a difficult first couple of turns getting out of my deployment zone. Once I did crack out of it, though, things just started falling left and right. So it was pretty wild to see like tanks going down to Rodigus, and the beasts of Nurgle were taking out stuff on their own, and I didn't have any plague bearers left. But the things that were on the board were doing what they could, and it was one of those times where it was like, that's how the Nurgle detachment works, is that it's a patient game. Okay, you've locked me in. Okay, you're in combat with me right away. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to wait, because maybe I don't kill you in 1 turn of combat, but maybe I'll kill you in 2, or maybe I'll kill you in 3. And you won't kill me in the meantime is the big and important thing there. That ability to regenerate wounds and models with battle shocks is great. It wasn't in our game, but I heard in one of my other games, somebody was like, hey, I shot you with this gun, now you have to take a battle shock. And I looked at him and I was like, are you sure? You only did 2 wounds. And he was like, yeah, I think I have to. And we checked and he had to. And so I took the battle shock, I got 3 wounds back. I was like, you're not going to kill me this turn. So yeah, it was just a very patient game. And of course, I didn't come out on top, but there was nothing that I shouldn't be proud of in that game. I mean, keeping that to 1 point, coming back from, I think it was like a 25 or 30 point deficit, that was a ton of fun, just to be able to like ride that out and see how far I could take it and kind of stretch the limits of that detachment. So it was a lot of fun. The key takeaways, though, really, I mean, prior to the tournament, I was running Soul Grinders. I love those guys, but it was kind of starting to feel like I was managing a parking lot. So I went from 2 down to 1, And then I didn't even run a game with one, and then I just dropped them completely and decided, no, I'm going full Battle Shock. I missed those Soul Grinders quite a bit, though. So I think going forward, I am going to pick up another Soul Grinder. I want him in the list because that Strength 16, AP 3, Rodriguez can make him D6 plus 3 damage. The indirect fire is also pretty invaluable with lethal hits. So I definitely want to include that. The other thing that I'm looking to make a change on is including Epidemius, who is a CP generator. There was a bit of a misconception when we were starting this, and there's not a lot of experience out there with this detachment, so there wasn't a lot for me to pull off of. But the general ruling was that Epidemius didn't get his tallies whenever you would kill something with mortal wounds. Phil and I kind of looked at it today, and we were like, wait, they're triggering a army rule that kills something, so yes, it does count towards his tallies. So there's still a big obstacle there, which is just the fact that you can only gain one bonus CP per turn. So his tally only will reset, but you've hit your 7, you don't get your CP, and now it resets back to 1. And then next turn you're starting all over again. So that's probably still going to be something that I have to overcome a little bit, but I've kind of picked up some insight as far as not worrying so much as what it is that I'm taking off of the board with this detachment, more of just where's my presence on the board. And then as well, there's significant power in the different stratagems that are available to you inside of Plague Legion. The one to make you +1 to hit and then force a battle shock is huge, because there's guys like Bile Piper are great, but they don't work against monsters and vehicles. But that stratagem works against monsters and vehicles. And so having that other set of tools in my pocket to be able to actually manage things like a knight matchup or big tank lists like Lane was running, kind of give me the extra edge on those battle shocks is definitely something that I'm going to appreciate.
Yeah, that is awesome. I think it's great that you're one of the 12, as you said, that are trying out this detachment. And I think it just goes to prove you can take things that other people aren't and definitely make them work. I mean, that was a super close game we had, and it was a ton of fun. And I definitely think there is a lot of play for the Nurgle detachment for sure.
They definitely have all the tools, the tricks needed. The mobility is the biggest thing I think they probably struggle with, right? You have to be very careful with your deployment. You have to be very careful in terms of how you pressure things. And that mobility could be something that a newer player might struggle with, right? Playing that detachment for the first time. I think Beau would tell you, and I would tell you, don't get disheartened if Plague Legion is something that you want to try, or just Nurgle Demons in general. There is a learning curve. And that learning curve is probably based on deployment, on movement, and it's probably based on using those battle shocks correctly. Because at the end of the day, you're using them to deny primaries. You should be using them to deny defensive buffs, offensive buffs. That is where you get your money's worth, but that money's worth isn't apparent when you're building the list, because you see these data sheet abilities, you're like, wow, that's kind of mediocre or average. That's not where you get your value with this army. You get this value with denying the opportunity someone has to theirs. Now, talked about Plague Legion, we talked about all the things. Let's talk about the meta for a little bit. You, as a Nurgle player, what are you most concerned with? If you were to sit up on the table and look across from you, what is the one thing you don't want to see?
Yeah, and I mean, it ties a lot into what you were just talking about with the mobility side of things. My ability to get across the board is next to nothing. If my opponent is screening me out with chaff, or they're putting stuff into me that's not easy for me to kill, like Phil or Lane did in our game, where he threw a couple of tanks and sentinels in, where I don't have the strength to deal with it. I'm wounding you on 5s. It might take me 2 or 3 turns to shoot through. So Gene Stealer Colts come to mind. Which is hilarious because I think in one of your other episodes you said oh, Nurgle is my boogeyman because of all the T12, and it's well, it's great, but if I can't get past you, then it doesn't mean anything. So GSE comes to mind. Orcs was definitely one that kind of surprised me, but looking back, it makes sense. They have the high tough or the good enough toughness and saves to deal with my crappy strength and AP. My low damage doesn't kill them in one hit. I don't have guns to be able to shoot at things. So anything that kind of is a matchup where you're well, why don't you just shoot it as the answer? That's a kind of matchup where I'm not looking to get into. So and then as well, anything that can screen me. I mean, yeah, World Eaters as well. I did play a game against World Eaters, and I managed to get a few lucky dice rolls, but that should have been a much less close game. I still took the loss, but it was 90 to 95. So, and as well, the one that I'm kind of anticipating, Matt, our buddy, is going to start running Death Guard again, and he's going to ignore my modifiers. So things that ignore modifiers is something that's going to be tough, because then you're back to your 6-up leadership. I want you at a 7 or an 8 or even a 9 in some instances. So anything that has high leadership that ignores modifiers, anything that can screen me out, and anything where the big answer is shooting. Those are all kind of my boogeymen at this moment.
Oh, it's really interesting because, like, the first armies that come to mind, Ironstorm, like, that's an army that almost doesn't need stratagems because everything is built off that oath in terms of reroll hits and +1 to wound, which you definitely don't want to see because you pay the premium for high toughness and you kind of lose out on that, and you can't even stop it with battle shocks and stuff like that. New Eldar, we'll see what that looks like. A few of our individuals, Nick included, we're definitely watching that with bated breath because we want to see it as much as possible before we make a like, hey, this is going to be something you have to plan for. So that'll be really interesting. But there is no doubt that it is a mobile army, and it will continue to be a mobile army as long as GW sticks to like the premise of what they do, right? So overall, good. All right, Beau. Once again, we appreciate you coming on. Lane, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you want to add?
All I want to do is just say thank you again for just being an awesome, individual
I think
host,
you muted yourself,
and
Lane.
just, it's really such an honor to be able to come down and get to hang out with all of you guys in the Springs. We're honorary Brotan, all of you Springs guys. We're honorary Cluckers. That's just the way it is. We've been together since we both started playing, and I haven't been to a tournament that I haven't met somebody from the Springs. And I was like, have you guys met these guys? You got to go meet Beau. If you haven't, you need to. And stuff, because you guys are awesome, and I'm so thankful that Colorado Springs has such great leadership down there.
No, I appreciate it. We're having a ton of fun. I just want as many people to come down and have fun with us as they can.
Awesome. Well, I think that'll be it for this one. Thanks again for coming on, Beau. It was great to have you, and don't forget, victory isn't a given, it is forged. Almost forgot the whole line, but whatever. We haven't been doing this long enough. Phil, any last thoughts?
No, once again, really appreciate you coming on, Beau. It means the world to us. It means the world that you started a community like this, and it's a great thing that we can access here in the Front Range. I wish you all the success because I will be down there again. I know I go down there on Tuesdays, but I just can't wait to see where this club goes and all the things that you're able to do with it.
Yeah, we're excited, and I really appreciate you guys having me. It was great talking with you guys. Thanks so much for coming over the weekend too. It was great to have you.
Yeah, we had a
Alrighty.
blast.
Yep. Yeah. Great time. And with that, we will be leaving off, and we will catch you guys next time.